Good morning, everyone. This is the first of my new monthly question and answer sessions, just to try and provide a little bit more contact with my constituents during this new lockdown. And we put out a Facebook post and had a number of questions that people wanted to put to me. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to hand over now to Josh Richards, who's going to put those questions to me, and I will do my best to answer them. So over to you, Josh.
Great, yeah, so we've had quite a few questions about the vaccine rollout, so I'll ask those together. We've had one constituent email in saying, my parents are over 80 years old and they still haven't received any communication yet. Why might that be?
Well, let me say straight away that I completely understand that all older people and people who have older parents in the area are obviously extremely keen to get their loved ones vaccinated as quickly as possible. So the good news is that it is rolling out in our area. The Priory Gardens GP surgery in Dunstable has been vaccinating people. We've also got another centre in Toddington. And I'm assured by Bedfordshire Clinical Commissioning Group that there will also be a centre up and running by this Friday, the 14th of, sorry, it's Friday the 15th, isn't it? Yes, my apologies. So Friday the 15th of January, we should have a Leighton Buzzard centre up running as well. In addition to that, we do have the major centre in Stevenage, and I understand that some people have also locally been offered a chance to have a vaccination in Aylesbury, and I completely understand that many people will want to have their vaccination as locally as possible. It will be difficult for some people to travel. I contacted the vaccines minister last night about the supply locally, because the government has admitted, we're in the early days of producing a brand new vaccine, and the constraint is getting hold of enough vaccine. And I think there has unfortunately been a pause in the Dunstable GP practice vaccinating. But I hope they will have new supplies of vaccine very quickly. And as I say, I contacted the vaccines minister about that last night. So what I would just ask people, please, is be patient. This is absolute #1 national priority. As your MP, I am in almost daily contact with Bedfordshire Clinical Commissioning Group and with health ministers to try and make sure that we get our supply of vaccines locally. And I will keep on the backs of ministers and the CCG to make sure that that happens. But people will be contacted by their GP surgery. So please don't ring your surgery. They've got enough on at the moment. They will contact you. And I'm doing everything possible as your MP to sort of speed up that rollout and get the vaccinations done locally as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I think you covered quite a few bases there. So I hope that the constituents who emailed in from Leighton Buzzard about the work that's being done there, and also in Eaton Bray, are aware of the options that exist for them. So let's move on, shall we? So we've got another question that's come in from a constituent asking about the Zoo Support Fund and when it will become accessible to zoos and other animal care charities that have been closed for all of these months and rely solely or predominantly on visitor income.
Yeah, well, like pretty much everyone locally, I'm a massive fan of Whipsnade Zoo. Used to take my children there regularly when they were younger. I have rejoined as a member myself. Did that last year just to put some more regular money going into the zoo. There is a bit of a frustration with the Zoo Animals Fund. It's a £100 million fund to help zoos, but I understand at the moment that only about 5 million of that has been distributed, because it's meant to prevent any zoo having to put animals down because they didn't have the money to look after them, which would obviously be a completely unacceptable state of affairs. And to that extent, it has worked. But what it hasn't done is help zoos financially in the way that many of us hoped that it would during these very difficult times. I have just put down a question, in fact, to environment ministers for next Thursday, asking about the criteria for that fund. And also, I think it's particularly important that outside areas of zoos are right at the top of the priority list as we loosen restrictions after lockdown. I contacted the Director General of the Zoological Society of London, who runs both Whipsnade and London Zoo. They're part of the same organisation, last night in advance of this interview. And he said actually the thing which he wants above all else is to be able to open again. And he would love that to be possible, say at February half term. Obviously that will depend on where we are with the vaccine rollout and the level of infection in the community, and depend on how the NHS is coping and so on. But if we could get to a situation where people were only visiting the outside areas of zoos in a very socially distanced manner, you know, that is really pretty much the same as walking around the grounds of a National Trust property or going around Kew Gardens, which you are allowed to do at the moment. And Whipsnade is over 600 acres. It's lots of space, lots of fresh air. And I think that would really help the zoo and make a big difference to people locally. It's particularly frustrating because we just had managed to reopen Whipsnade when we had the Tier 4 restrictions before we went into the national lockdown. There was the law was changed to allow the outside areas of zoos to be open just for that brief period, which I was delighted about. But unfortunately, we've lost that with this new national lockdown. So that's also on my campaigning agenda with the government at the moment.
Great. Let's move on to a different question now. So we've had someone, one of your constituents, email in to see if you could advise them as to whether the Chancellor plans to force lenders to extend the 6-month mortgage holiday, and if not, perhaps whether there's something you could do about that.
Yes, and I really understand the very difficult position that lots of people are in. So there is the ability to take a 6-month mortgage holiday, and that the ability to take that 6-month holiday from paying your mortgage has been extended right up until the 31st of March. So that means that you could potentially take it out you'll start using it in late March and use it up to late September this year. Unfortunately, it is just for that 6-month period, although your lender may be able to defer payments or come to some other arrangement with you. If you are in that position, then I understand that if you do request that information will unfortunately be passed on to credit rating agencies. So I think what I would say to people is that anyone who needs to do that, you know, please use this facility, this 6-monthly mortgage holiday. If you need additional help over and above that, then you must talk to your lender as soon as possible. Try and have a dialogue with them. I would be delighted to write on behalf of any constituents who feel they are not being treated fairly by their lender. I think many people will be able to get on their feet again financially as the economy sort of picks up later this year, as the economy opens up again. So I think what people are asking for is a sort of breathing space just to get them through this time. But that is the current position, a 6-monthly holiday, and it has been extended up to the 31st of March.
Yes, we've had a broad array of different topics in these questions. So now we move to the environment, and we've got a constituent who says that they're new to the area, and so we'd like to get to know what your position on the environment is, and having looked at your voting record, just wanting to kind of clarify a few things and to ask what you're doing as the MP of South West Bedfordshire in this area.
Sure. Well, it's a really good question, and I'm very pleased that it's been asked. And if you look at my record, I can claim to be a green conservative before David Cameron first started making it fashionable, if you like. I can point to articles I wrote about this issue before he first sort of started raising it. Let me address the voting record issue very directly. Because I knew this question was coming up, I went and did a little bit of research. So if you take animal welfare, there are 18 different positive measures improving animal welfare that I've either voted for, or their actions or money have been allocated in that area. There are 60 either laws passed or extra grants made, or very important international actions taken in climate change, over 35 on the natural environment, and I think I counted about 13 as far as the oceans are concerned, which is incredibly important. 70% of the Earth's surface is ocean, and really, you know, oceans can be a big part of actually helping us deal with climate change, helping restore biodiversity. So, you know, that is a lot of measures which I have positively voted for, supported budgets which have allocated that money, supported initiatives which, you know, governments which I've supported have taken since, you know, 2010 or so. Some of the negative votes will probably relate to opposition day votes, which all opposition parties do. Conservatives did it when they were in opposition. Labour have obviously done it, you know, since 2010. And those motions, I think, you know, in a sense, can be designed just to sort of trap the government. And they perhaps don't always understand the broader context within which the government is operating, other legal requirements, other actions that the government is taking. And I have to say, I do slightly disagree with the way in which some organisations like They Work For You categorise these votes, because they can say, oh, you voted against that, that and that, but then they fail to be fair, actually, and just say, well, actually, you also voted for those 60 positive measures on climate change, and those 18 measures on animal welfare, and those 35 on the natural environment, and those 13 on oceans. So that's dealing with the voting record aspect. But specifically, areas which I have campaigned and worked on, when I was on the Health Select Committee, I sort of lobbied for the committee to do an inquiry into air quality, and I was asked to chair the Health Select Committee, part of that joint inquiry with 3 other House of Commons select committees. So that's really important on air quality. On aviation greenhouse gas emissions, many of my constituents work at Luton Airport. It's the country's fifth biggest airport. And what I'm incredibly excited about at the moment is the work of the Jet Zero Council. And I've been up to see Zero Avia, based here in Bedfordshire at Cranfield. They had the first ever hydrogen-powered passenger aircraft flight in the whole world. And that was here in Bedfordshire on the 20th of September last year. Luton Airport, believe it or not, or London Luton as I should call them, are committed to be the most sustainable airport in the country. Now, I'm writing to get a bit more detail on exactly what that involves, but they have publicly committed to that. And I heard them say that only last week in a meeting I was with them on. And I've also been over to see the Whittle Laboratory at Cambridge, which is absolutely world leading in, you know, sort of developing carbon neutral flight, run by the brilliant Professor Rob Miller. So you know, that is really important to me. I think it's very exciting. I think, like many of my constituents, I want to be able to go on flying, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't harm the planet. and I want Britain to be, the United Kingdom, to be at the absolute forefront of that new technology, so we can benefit from it here, and we can sell it around the world and have lots of, you know, high paying jobs as well. I've also taken a big interest in electric vehicles. Was sad enough, if you like, to actually go and open the first ever electric vehicle charging point in Leighton Buzzard car park. I know it wasn't working for a bit of last year, but I, you know, got onto the council to try and get it fixed, and the same actually for the first ones in Dunstable behind Go Bowling. We need many more. I've also been talking to the council about planting more trees locally, about treating hedgerows better. So, for instance, we should be cutting our hedges back only every third year, and later in the winter, there's much more blossom, berries and so on to sustain birds through winter, help biodiversity. And Central Bedfordshire Council have been very, very responsive to that. Obviously, if there's a road safety issue, of course, you need to cut the hedge back. I'm not necessarily talking about garden hedges. I'm talking about hedges on farmland deep in the countryside, which, you know, we just should see being a bit messier and larger, to be honest, you know, in order to have more sort of flowers and berries on. I'm also very interested in soil health and regenerative agriculture. And if anyone has access to a Netflix service, I have no shares in them, by the way, but there is a brilliant film called Kiss the Ground, which I watched over Christmas. It's an hour and 24 minutes. I find it very inspirational, about soil health and regenerative agriculture, and actually what looking after the soil can do to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, which was an issue I didn't have a full appreciation of. And I've been talking to one of our leading professors in that area who worked on a big United Nations report on soil health, which came out in December. So I hope that gives a flavour of some of the areas that I'm personally interested in. I've also done work on zero energy bill homes, following the introduction by South Beds Friends of the Earth of Bill Dunster to this area, and continue to press government to make further progress in that area. Sorry, Josh, it's a terribly long answer, but I do know it's an issue of huge concern to lots and lots of people.
Thank you. We've got another question now, which is less to do with policy, but more to do with your work as an MP. Yeah, it's a question about how you prioritise your time, and whether you kind of prioritise constituent affairs, and also when constituents are temporarily abroad, whether they're travelling on holiday, whether that changes things in terms of the attention or care that you give to them and their concerns.
Sure. Well, it's a very, very good and a very important question. So my view is very simple. My constituents are my employers, all sort of 80,000 of you. So dealing with constituency correspondence and casework is a really high priority for me. I try and get through the enormous number of emails we get every day. I try and deal with them as they come in. That is quite strained sometimes on top of parliamentary business and my other commitments that I have in Parliament. But that is an absolute priority for me. No MP gets to do anything else unless they look after their constituents properly. And I think one of the brilliant things about our system is because we have that direct contact with our constituents, which, you know, perhaps you wouldn't have in such a direct way in a PR system. I'm not arguing particularly against PR. I'm just saying I think one of the benefits of our system is that you are very identifiable as the MP for a particular area. You know, generally people do know who to come to. I get quite a lot of recommendations now. People say, "Oh, you helped my sister," or "My neighbour said you sorted something out for them," and I'm, you know, and that's really good. So absolutely, you know, I work very hard on that. My staff work very hard on that. I'm conscious that it is taking longer to get replies back from government departments at the moment. I think that's probably not surprising because a lot of civil servants are, working from home in quite cramped conditions. They're not able to work quite as efficiently or fast as they were in the past. And I do apologise to my constituents on the government's behalf, if you like, because of that, because I know that's frustrating. We always send on replies as soon as we get them. And I would, my constituents are my constituents wherever they are in the world as well. So, if you're abroad, that's fine. If you're stuck overseas and, you need consular assistance or anything like that, then, absolutely fine to email me and contact me as well. And I will help my constituents wherever they are in the world.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We've just got 3 questions left. We're actually going to return to the topic of vaccination because someone has emailed in and has asked about whether schools could be utilised. Of course, schools are closed until minimum of mid-February, and children are studying at home. And this constituent is wondering whether school buildings could be used as temporary vaccination centres in order to bolster the immunisations that are able to occur in the next month or so. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's a great suggestion, and I've also had I've had people offer their village halls. I've had churches offer their buildings as well, and all incredibly grateful for those offers. I was on a call with the vaccines minister last night, and the good news, in a sense, is that we are actually quite a way beyond that. We're actually into the delivery phase now. We have already identified all the vaccination sites that we are going to need across the country. The big constraint, as I said earlier, unfortunately, is getting hold of enough vaccine. Production will ramp up in any new manufacturing process. Remember, this is a brand new vaccine, a novel vaccine, as it's called. So I think, realistically, we have to expect that the manufacturing process is going to be a little bit sort of lumpy and bumpy in the very earliest stages. But those issues will get smoothed out, and we will, get significantly greater supplies of the vaccine. The vaccines minister says he has clear line of sight of supply, over the next few weeks now, which is why I think we can be confident that we will have enough vaccine, for the Dunstable site, for the Leighton Buzzard site, for Toddington, a little bit to the north of my constituency, and for the larger centres in Aylesbury and in Stevenage locally. I know it's frustrating that we're not quite there yet, and I am, very much on the case in talking to the vaccines minister and the clinical commissioning group about this. But basically, we have already identified where we're going to give the vaccinations. It's just getting enough vaccine. But it's, enormously kind offers. I'm very grateful to schools, to village halls, to churches and others who even the Old Palace Lodge in Dunstable very, very kindly offered their premises as well. So many, many kind and helpful offers, from businesses, schools, churches, and so on, all of which incredibly grateful for. But as I say, we are in the delivery mode now. We just need to get enough vaccine.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, of course, COVID has brought a lot of national debt. Government have had to spend a lot of money. We've had a question wondering whether this massive debt accumulated will lead to the further reduction of foreign aid contributions, and if not, should it lead to a further reduction?
Well, I have a very sort of straightforward view on this, in that I believe that manifesto promises, commitments should be respected, and we fought a general election only just over a year ago, in which we did commit to keep our aid spending at 0.7% of gross national income. So I was disappointed and upset when the government rode back from that, because the amount would have gone down anyway, as the economy has very sadly got smaller because of the pandemic. I would very much hope that this would be a temporary reduction from 0.7. To be fair to the government, they have said that that is their intention, that it is just temporary. I think people do understand. We've obviously had a massive shock to the nation's finances. I think it's important people realise, though, that the UK does remain an aid superpower. We will still be spending £10 billion on overseas development assistance next year. And that doesn't count, actually, the unbelievable humanitarian work which our armed forces do all around the world. That's not counted within, as far as I understand it, the official definition of overseas development assistance. And our armed forces do absolutely incredible humanitarian development work, if you like, around the world. So, it obviously remains on the table. I did criticise it in Parliament the day after it happened. As I say, I just think that governments should stick to what they say that they're going to do in manifestos.
Great. And then we've got our final question, which comes from a constituent who, is perhaps worried about the situation of going abroad on holiday now that Brexit has occurred. We're hoping that we can go on holiday when the borders are open. So people are planning already. Will I still need to get medical insurance if I travel to Europe? And there's also kind of a subsection to that question, which is, what is the status of EU citizens seeking medical treatment here in the UK? Could you maybe affirm this gentleman that there's not going to be an unfair situation whereby there's greater access for EU citizens compared to the UK going abroad?
Yeah, well, I completely understand that there should be fairness. So my understanding on this, Josh, is that the European Health Insurance cards, the EHIC cards, which many of us have, they will be valid up to their expiry date, but sadly they're not going to continue after that. But the government is intending to replace them with a global health insurance card, so a GHIC rather than an EHIC, if you like. In terms of health insurance, I mean, I think it's actually always a good idea, in fact, completely essential, to be honest, to take that out anyway, because your EHIC card may mean you get free treatment, although, to be honest, in places like France, they actually charge you up front, and then you have to try and reclaim the money back afterwards. But there are many things that the EHIC card doesn't cover, particularly sort of air repatriation. My sister-in-law fell and broke a couple of bones and had to get repatriated to the UK to have an operation in an air ambulance just before Christmas. But so that sort of thing, you will only get covered if you do have insurance. And without naming any of them particularly, there are a number of sites on the internet where you can just type in, holiday travel insurance, and find them for pretty good value, to be honest. So I think it's just a question of people remembering to do that on your holiday checklist. Always better to be safe than sorry. I got bitten by a scorpion once on holiday and ended up in hospital for 2 nights, having quite an expensive anti-scorpion serum. So I'm a part of that small but select club of scorpion survivors. I luckily did have holiday insurance. I'd taken my own advice, but I've no doubt I'd have been left with a very, very hefty bill if I hadn't had that. So I don't have the full details yet on the global health insurance card, but I will try and find out about that. I'm very happy to provide that further information to any constituents who would like it.
Great, thank you. That's helpful for all of us. We've got no more questions received for this week, or this month, should I say. But yeah, thank you for all your answers. I hope they've been helpful to everyone that's emailed in. And yes, we will be doing this monthly. So check Andrew's social media for further updates.
Great, thank you very much, Josh. And we'll obviously look at the feedback we get in and maybe tweak things if necessary. But thank you for those of you that have taken the time to watch as well. And thank you, Josh, for asking the questions.